they'd bulldozed my barn at dawn, 5 years of sweat flattened in 5 minutes so their Tuscan in Texas subdivision wouldn't have to look at honest lumber and livestock. 30 confused longhorns bawled in the mud while the HOA queen posed beside the wreckage like she'd just rescued the county from rustic indecency. She figured a landscaping budget, a stack of permits, and a Pinterest vision board entitled her to rewrite 50 acres of history. But when you build a silk-lined kingdom on somebody else's clay, don't whine when the mud rises to greet you. Ever seen a $1 million wedding sink knee-deep in that mud? She figured a handful of high-pressure pumps, a stack of shiny permits, and a designer backyard gave her permission to rewrite 50 years of dirt and sweat. But here's the thing. If you build your little kingdom on someone else's roots, don't act shocked when the ground spits mud back at you. Drop a comment and tell me, ever seen a wedding get muddy for all the wrong reasons? I'm Cal Mason, 58, pipefitter by trade, rancher by stubborn ambition, and the sort of fellow who thinks a handshake still outranks a notary seal. I bought this measly patch when pasture land was cheaper than a golf membership, cleared mesquite with my own calloused hands, and raised that barn board by blistered board. Each nail I drove felt like depositing $1 in a wooden savings account. Watching that excavator turn my investment into artisanal mulch wasn't just heartbreaking. It was compound interest evaporating in diesel fumes. The demolition crew looked ashamed, but Vanessa? She posed for progress photos beneath a parasol, her grin as white as the linen draped over her conscience. You should know, Silver Brush Vista Estates, the pastel subdivision sprouting beyond my back fence, sells Tuscan serenity to tech retirees who think cattle belong on charcuterie boards, not actual fields. These folks crave hill country sunsets for Instagram, yet recoil at rooster wake-up calls. Vanessa, a former boutique buyer who married into bigger money than sense, took one glance at my cedar barn and decided it was the blemish on her brochure. Our HOA rulebook reads like a bedtime story for beige stucco. No visible tools, no audible livestock, and absolutely no structures older than last quarter's decor trend. Apparently, authenticity is unsightly unless it comes pre-distressed at the home goods store. Funny twist. Before I ever slung hay bales, I spent a decade mapping every waterline beneath this county. While Vanessa was choosing throw pillows, I was burying cast-iron arteries her precious lake can't breathe without. Somewhere in a dusty file cabinet, my name still sits on the emergency operator list for Silverbrush's entire water system. The same woman who tried to erase me with a backhoe is one maintenance call away from needing my wrench. She demolished wood, I control water. And out here, water is worth more than law degrees and linen dresses combined. So I didn't scream while the barn splintered, didn't swing fists at the excavator. I just sipped lukewarm coffee and thought about gravity, how water always flows downhill, how arrogance eventually follows, and how revenge, like cattle, fattens quietly before sale day. Vanessa believes a Pinterest vision board and a lawyer's letterhead can rewrite land that fed families long before she discovered farm-to-table brunch. But when you build a silk-lined kingdom on somebody else's clay, don't whine when the mud rises to greet you. Ever watched a $1 million wedding sink knee-deep in that mud? Stick around. The ground remembers, and I've got a valve with her resort's name engraved on it. The morning after the barn massacre looked like a Civil War battlefield for cattle. 30 bewildered longhorns lowing among splintered cedar, their eyes wide as choir boys at a burnt church. They wandered through nails and timber, sniffing the ashes of what used to be home, while Vanessa's demolition crew packed up like carnival grifters with a quick getaway. I stood there counting losses that hadn't even happened yet, and wondering how many sunrises a man can stomach before bitterness bleeds into the coffee. Stay with me, because the real damage hadn't shown its face. Within 48 hours, the emergency fallout hit harder than a hailstorm on tin. 5 of my weaker cows died from stress and exposure. 10 more I sold for pennies just to thin the herd before the rest went belly up. Word traveled faster than a rodeo rumor, and pretty soon local suppliers treated my credit like a mayfly on the grill. Brief flash, quick sizzle, gone. People who once waved now turned invisible, as if misfortune were contagious, and I'd started sneezing for clothes. Stick around, because Vanessa hadn't even used her favorite weapon yet: gossip. She launched a rumor offensive so slick you'd swear it came with a corporate logo, told anyone within Chardonnay range that my manure runoff was poisoning Silverbrush Lake, turning her koi into floaters and young grandchildren into future plaintiffs. The HOA board, eager to polish its halo, voted me off the shared well I'd helped dig a decade earlier. Watching the ballot count felt like having my water turned off, with a grin and a handshake. Rivers carve canyons over time, and so do lies. Don't go just yet. The next canyon gets deeper. Friday brought an official county envelope, fat with disdain. A $2,300, 0 cents, citation for unsightly agricultural residues. Bureaucracy squeezes like a python. Slow coils, certain end, and this fine wrapped another rung around my ribs. The notice suggested I modernize waste management facilities, as if I could Amazon Prime a new ranch overnight. I pictured Vanessa toasting the letterhead with imported Prosecco, celebrating how paper cuts sharper when stamped with a seal. But paperwork cuts both ways, and the county records still carried my signature in ink, older than her HOA charter. Hold that thought. That night, Salvation rolled up in a beat-up county pickup, rattling like loose change in a dryer. Out stepped Troy Delgado, my old trench-digging sidekick turned maintenance supervisor. We cracked open 2 Lone Stars under a moon so bright it felt bipartisan. Troy eyed the rubble, then leaned close like we were back in the ditch swapping secrets. "Cal, you still got the master keys to the lake's emergency guts?" I nearly laughed. Hadn't thought about those keys in years, but yes, they were still in my toolbox, collecting dust and authority. The gears in my head started turning louder than cicadas, and Troy's quiet grin said he heard every click. Don't wander off. The universe was about to mail Vanessa an RS. 2 days later, a glossy envelope arrived on my doorstep, thick as a catalog and scented like lavender ambition. Inside, an invitation to Vanessa's daughter's Lavender Moon wedding. 2,000 guests, lakeside vows, drone fireworks, the whole influencer circus, in exactly 3 weeks. I stared at the calligraphy while Troy's question echoed in my skull, and for the first time since the bulldozer, the taste of revenge was sweeter than pecan pie. You'll want to hear how a simple wrench can outshine a $1,000 centerpiece, so stick around. This shindig's about to get muddy in more ways than one. Small takeaway? When money swings the wrecking ball, it's easy to believe the fight is already lost. Cattle die, neighbors vanish, and bureaucracy hisses like a python. But pay close attention. The same system that can weaponize rumors and fines also leaves forgotten keys in the hands of folks who built the pipes in the first place. In other words, never assume the little guy is powerless. Sometimes he's just waiting for the right valve to turn. Troy and I slipped down the old county maintenance road with the lights off, mesquite branches wrapping the truck doors like impatient knuckles. At the sagging fence line, we pried open a hatch I hadn't touched in years and stared into the lake's hidden artery system. Pipes thick as tree trunks, valves bronze with age, yet still humming their quiet promise of leverage. A laminated service sheet lay under a cobweb, my signature still legible beside the words, "Authorized operator, permanent." I felt a low hum of ownership, the sort that settles in your bones when the world insists you're powerless, yet the paperwork disagrees. Back at the kitchen table, I buried myself in county code. Lucky the healers snoring at my feet while statutes piled like overdue bills. One clause caught the lamplight. Emergency lake maintenance mandated every 3rd Sunday of Q3, 2 to 6 p.m., the exact window of Vanessa's Lavender Moon wedding. Cross-checking pump logs and inspection calendars confirmed it twice. I pinned the clause above the stove next to the foreclosure notice the bank had tacked onto my splintered barn: replace the structure in 60 days or surrender the land. 2 sheets of paper, one threatening to swallow everything, the other offering a razor-thin path to survival. Credit had collapsed the same week the barn did. Feed suppliers demanded cash upfront, neighbors turned sideways, and I sold 10 head of prime beef for little more than gas money. 5 weaker cows died from stress, their bodies hauled off before dawn so vultures wouldn't broadcast my losses. Reputation in a small county disintegrates faster than rawhide in a rain barrel. One rumor about tainted runoff, and suddenly I was enemy number one. The HOA vote booted me from the shared well, forcing daily water runs that burned both diesel and dignity. Bureaucracy moved like a python, squeezing slow and certain, each coil another citation or fee. Night after night, I weighed justice against revenge, while Lucky listened with that ancient dog patience. If I drained the lake completely, I'd hurt fish, foundations, maybe even the aquifer. Water is life, and life is bigger than wedding photographs. The real target wasn't the ecosystem, it was the illusion of untouchable luxury. A precision strike formed in my mind. 3/4 turn of the main wheel at 2:40 p.m. Drop the shoreline just enough to ruin the camera angles, then lock the valve before permanent harm set in. Drain vanity, not life. I walked the plan through in daylight, timing the distance from hatch to gauge, noting pump capacities, double-checking shutoff lag. Years of pipe fitting had tuned my instincts. Every pressure reading, every flow calculation etched itself clear as brand iron. All that remained was legal cover, and the statute delivered it in ink. I was obliged to perform the maintenance. Obligation can be a beautiful alibi. The last piece arrived in a lavender-scented envelope, heavy with embossed gilt, an invitation to the very ceremony I'd be servicing. Calligraphy inked my name as if history required my witness. I set it beside the foreclosure notice and the drainage statute, a paper stack of motive, means, and opportunity. As I oiled the wrench and packed a thermos, the tents across the fence glowed pearly white, humming with rehearsal laughter. Somewhere beyond the lights, Vanessa toasted her perfect timeline. Meanwhile, the real clock, the one ticking beneath her waterline, started its quiet countdown. Small takeaway: the same blue ribbon rules that wealthy gatekeepers wield as weapons can turn into boomerangs when someone who actually built the bones of a place knows where the hidden hinges are. Power isn't just money or titles, it's understanding the system well enough to choose whether to fix the leak or let it spray. So if you've ever felt a rich handshake strangling your roots, remember, the bylaws cut both ways. Know them, and the same papers that threaten foreclosure can become blueprints for justice. Hit that subscribe button, share your own paper PP stories in the comments, and keep the coffee hot. Next time we spin the wrench, we'll find out whether timing a 3/4 turn can bring an empire to its knees without drowning the man who turned it. Saturday showed up swaggering, sky the color of a new credit card, heat so thick it felt like the sun had traded in rays for rent money. Drones zipped overhead like paparazzi hornets, mapping every angle of Vanessa's lakeside dreamscape, while hired swans practiced figure eights for the reception photos. She marched along the shoreline in a pearl-studded shawl, barking orders at caterers, florists, and one unlucky teenager steering a swan boat named Eternity. The lake shimmered behind her like a giant vanity mirror, perfectly still, perfectly fake, perfectly ready. All it needed was a bride, a violin, and a single unseen hand turning fate's dimmer switch. And that hand just so happened to be gripping a county-issued wrench. Stick around. The final rehearsal is seconds from curtain. 200 yards away, hidden by mesquite and municipal negligence, I checked the gauge. 2:28 p.m., 87 psi, and falling. Wedding march wafted across the water. The kind of sugary string arrangement that makes grown men contemplate their credit limits. My fingers settled on the valve wheel, cool as courthouse marble, and I breathed out the countdown my father used when branding calves. 3, 2, 1.5, for luck. The wheel resisted like old pride, then surrendered with a metallic sigh. I didn't yank it wide. I eased it a smooth 3/4 turn, enough to start a whisper under the lily pads, like turning down the volume on pretension. The pump roared in the distance, oblivious that its workload had just doubled. Pressure dropped, time thickened, and I watched water slip away the way money vanishes from a bad investment. Quietly at first, Then all at once, keep listening, the orchestra hasn't hit its sour note yet. Ocean. Vows floated through the speakers, buttery as movie popcorn. The bride glowed, the groom glistened, and the lake behind them sparkled obligingly, right until the sparkle edged backward like it was late for another appointment. First to notice was a flower girl tugging her mother's sleeve, pointing at a lily pad marooned on damp soil. Then a groomsman frowned, realizing the rocks he'd stood beside during rehearsal were now casting dry shadows. Even the minister's Bible looked surprised, pages fluttering as if to double-check the flood story. Gasps rippled through the seating like wind across wheat, and cameras pivoted from happy couple to unhappy shoreline. Guests whispered brand-new hashtags, bridesmaids clutched bouquets like life preservers. Still, Vanessa kept smiling, jaw locked, convinced this was a trick of the light, or worse, a glitch that could be photoshopped later. Hold on, because the glitch just ordered more horsepower. Vanessa stormed to the pump crew, heels stabbing turf, shawl flapping like an irritated sail. "Full circulation now," she barked, waving an iPad that probably cost more than my first truck. 4 industrial pumps kicked in, slurping lake water faster than a 5-year-old with a milkshake through a fire hose. Trouble is, a pump doesn't care which direction the water travels. Suck, push, same paycheck. The drainage system and her vanity engines formed a perfect tag team, accelerating the water's jailbreak. Shoreline retreated in real time, designer lily pads keeled over like fainting socialites. A videographer screamed, "We're losing the money shot," while drone pilots scrambled to recalibrate altitude before their aerial footage turned into a mud study. Vanessa's guests began migrating upslope, women lifting satin hems, men clutching heirloom cufflinks, everyone realizing the open bar was now an island. Stay tuned. The real punchline is about to step on stage. I emerged from the tree line wearing my best Sunday shirt, same one the bank manager had wrinkled his nose at last week. I walked straight toward Vanessa, still clutching that county wrench like a teacher's pointer. Her wrath hit me like warm champagne, loud, fizzy, but with zero punch. "You eco-terrorist?" she shrieked, mascara staging a jailbreak of its own. Phones rose like periscopes, live streams multiplying faster than mosquitoes after rain. I spoke steady as a weather report. "Ma'am, county code requires emergency inspection during today's window. I'm just the mechanic on duty." I held up the laminated permit. Cameras zoomed in like it was the 10 Commandments. The crowd buzzed, some laughing, some filming, some calculating resale values dropping by the gallon. Vanessa lunged, pumps roaring, lake draining, guests panicking, and somewhere a swan boat named Eternity bottomed out with a thud that echoed heartbreak. Stay close. Sirens are about to join the soundtrack. Red and blue lights crested the hill. Sheriff cruisers carving through luxury SUVs. Vanessa pointed at me with talons of spite. "Arrest him! He ruined everything," she wailed, voice cracking like glass in July. Deputies approached, hands on holsters, until I handed them the same paperwork that had tied Vanessa's HOA knots months ago. They read, blinked, and one deputy actually smirked. "Man," he said, tipping his hat toward her shrinking shoreline. "Looks like the gentleman's within his rights." The crowd erupted in a collective gasp that smelled faintly of schadenfreude and gardenias. Vanessa's pearl shawl sagged. Her empire had met mud, and mud wasn't impressed. "Will my documentation hold when lawyers start circling? Will the county back me once the real estate lobby calls in favors? Stick around, because this puddle's ripples are headed straight for courtrooms and cattle pens alike, and the next splash might land on me." Tiny takeaway before we rinse off the mud: a fancy budget can rent swans and shawls, but it can't outmuscle the quiet neighbor who actually knows which bolt holds the dream together. When pretension meets plumbing, paperwork beats pearls every single time. So if you've ever watched money spray everywhere the moment a single valve turns, remember this. Real power isn't glitter. It's knowing the system well enough to make it tell the truth. Hit that subscribe button, drop your own Paper Beats Pearl story in the comments, and stay tuned. Because next time we'll find out whether a stack of permits can keep a rancher out of handcuffs when lawyers start circling like buzzards. The sheriff's cruisers had barely cooled when the county inspectors rolled in. Clipboards, steel-toed boots, and that expression bureaucrats wear when they smell headlines. I handed over my laminated authorization like it was a backstage pass, and they triple-checked the seal while Vanessa hovered behind them, hissing threats about felony drainage and emotional distress. The senior inspector, a sun-baked woman named Ramirez, flipped pages, nodded once, and said, "Looks clean to me, ma'am. He's acting under Statute 12A7. Vanessa's shoulders slumped as if somebody let the air out of her designer tires. Her next threat died halfway up her throat, deflating with a sad whimper. Guests recorded the whole exchange, and you could practically hear the internet sharpening its memes. Ramirez turned to me with a half-smile and added, "We'll need a full inspection of the lake infrastructure now that it's drained. Might be a few irregularities. Stay tuned." Irregularities is government slang for somebody's about to write a very large check. 2 days later, the inspectors returned in hazmat suits and clipboards thick enough to stun cattle. Their core sample tests read like a crime novel. Unregistered fertilizers, undocumented runoff channels, and, biggest of all, a missing final environmental permit. Turns out Vanessa's pet developer had skipped the last step, an impact sign-off that required native species restoration, and Vanessa had borrowed an engineer's signature to keep construction on schedule. The county's forensics team spotted the forgery faster than a buzzard finds roadkill, and suddenly the HOA's proudest feature was Exhibit A in a public records scandal. What began as a petty war over my barn ballooned into a legal thicket with thorns sharper than any I'd planned. Bureaucracy, when it finally wakes up, moves like a wrecking ball. Slow, swing, unstoppable force. Don't wander off, the first bill is about to arrive. The county slapped Willowbrush HOA with an initial $75,000, 0 cents penalty for permit fraud, then added daily fines for unlicensed water diversion, $4,000, 0 cents every sunrise until compliance. Homeowners opened their mailboxes to find assessments the size of college tuition. Cocktail hour neighbors who'd once bragged about curating their hill country paradise were now cussing HOA board meetings like they'd discovered termites in the wine cellar. Vanessa tried a neighborhood email blast blaming rogue contractors, but screenshots of forged signatures circulated faster than her excuses, and friendships scattered like pigeons when the bread ran out. Lawyers materialized on doorsteps offering class action representation. Realtors pulled listings because pending litigation scares luxury buyers worse than snakes in the pool. The same community that cheered my barn's collapse turned on its queen bee with stingers out. Stick around, watching power implode is better than free cable. Meanwhile, the county realized it needed the original engineer who understood the lake system to repair it. Spoiler, that was me. Ramirez called one morning, voice polite but urgent. "Mr. Mason, can we retain you as a consultant? Budget's flexible." I named a figure high enough to rebuild my herd, expecting pushback. She approved it before I finished the sentence. 3 weeks later, I was sketching retrofit schematics while crews bulldozed the failed luxury shoreline. My first paycheck rebuilt the barn twice as stout. Railroad ties, steel trusses, and wind braces thick enough to moonlight as tornado shelters. The neighbors started calling it the compliance shack, half in awe, half in apology. Funny how credibility sprouts once paperwork sides with you. Suppliers reopened my accounts. The feed store offered a loyalty discount, and the bank manager suddenly remembered my first name. Redemption feels good, but cashing the check feels better. Wait till you hear where that money went next. Vanessa's freefall gained speed when the HOA board, facing collective bankruptcy, voted to remove her as president. She pleaded for grace, then threatened lawsuits, then staged a teary apology video that landed with all the sincerity of a plastic cactus. Sponsors pulled out of her charity gala, local boutiques yanked her line of artisan shawls, and rumor has it even the swan boat rental company sent a cease and desist for unpaid invoices. The lake, once her centerpiece, remained a shallow mud basin while environmental crews planted native reeds per my design. It looked less like a resort and more like the honest Texas pond it should have been in the first place. Tadpoles included, free of charge. News segments featured side-by-side photos. Vanessa's mansion above a for sale sign, my new barn gleaming under hill country sun. Poetic justice is nice. Photogenic justice pays dividends. Keep listening. There's one final chess move on the board. Late summer, I watched from the cab of my truck as a realtor hammered a post into Vanessa's manicured lawn. Price reduced, motivated seller. The mansion's marble columns and infinity pool still sparkled, but the aura of invincibility was gone, like a show horse with a limp. The agent recognized me, waved a brochure, and joked, "You in the market, Mr. Mason?" I laughed, but the idea rooted itself like mesquite. Buy the very fortress that tried to evict my roots. Could be poetic, could be foolish, could be the best cattle office west of Austin. I drove off, dust swirling in the rear view, thinking about legacy versus vengeance, land versus ego. The bank had cleared my accounts. The county still owed one more consulting payment. Choice hung in the air, hotter than asphalt. Claim the house or let it rot as a cautionary tale. Stick around. Next time we decide whether a rancher can sleep in a mansion without losing the grit that saved him, or if he'll just rope off the driveway and graze longhorns where roses once strutted. Either way, paperwork will keep score and you'll want front row seats. Lesson in the rubble. Flashy power fades, documented truth indoors. When permits meet integrity, even a mud-puddle rancher can outshine marble columns. So remember, keep your records straight and your wrenches handy, because fortunes built on forged signatures crumble faster than limestone in a Texas gully. Smash that subscribe button, drop a comment if you've ever watched Big Money trip over small print, and stick around next time we'll settle the million-dollar question. Do I turn Vanessa's old palace into the fanciest tack room in the county, or let the weeds write her epitaph? 6 months have rolled by, and the sun now drops behind a horizon of rye instead of ripples. My longhorns graze where swan boats once posed, fattening on the richest mud money never meant to make. The land kept score better than any ledger. Every hoofprint is a signature, reminding folks that Texas soil remembers its first language. Cattle, not couture. Funny how a place breathes easier once the mirrors are gone. But dusk always leaves one last glint, daring you to wonder what comes after twilight. When Vanessa's marble fortress hit the auction block, I raised my bidder card just high enough to startle the room and low enough to keep my poker face. One gavel crack later, the grand foyer smelled of polish and possibilities. We knocked out walls, rolled in picnic tables, and christened it Silverbrush Grange, a free-to-enter market where tomatoes sit next to tractor parts and veterans trade war stories over brisket. The chandeliers still sparkle, but now they light dented coolers and boot scuffs. Contrast can be beautiful if you let it dance. Each first Saturday, the parking lot fills with pickups instead of Porsches, and I catch myself grinning, thinking even marble can earn calluses if you give it enough community. Stick around. Those walls may have more to say. I spotted Vanessa last week outside the feed store, haircut shorter, hope thinner, coupons clutched like flotation devices. She pretended the feed bags were invisible. I pretended grace was cheap and tipped my hat anyway. Sometimes mercy feels heavier than revenge, but it travels farther, like a slow river that still manages to shape rock. As she hurried off, I wondered if she'd ever tell her new neighborhood why the word makes her flinch. Secrets, like water, can't stay pent up forever. You might meet her eyes yet, if she finds the courage to look past old reflections. Back on my side of the fence, the barn rises taller than the live oaks, a railroad tie fortress locals nicknamed the Compliance Shack. Storm braces could stop a freight train, and the new roof laughs at hailstones. Kids from the 4-H club paint branding irons on the doors, and their laughter fills beams that once echoed with splintered wood. The bank manager who doubted me dropped by with a smile too wide to trust, but I served him coffee anyway, strong enough to remind him real credit is brewed, not stamped. Every creak of the rebuilt rafters whispers, paper can threaten, but sweat still signs. Makes you wonder what else might grow when fear stops pruning imagination. Evenings wind down on the porch with Troy. 2 mugs of black coffee, and the kind of silence only lifelong friends can share. He'll tap the wrench hanging over the door like a retired badge and chuckle. In Texas, we respect 2 things, hard work and gravity. I raise my cup and finish the proverb. She ignored both. The rest was plumbing. The cicadas strike up their summer choir, and the rye field shimmers under moonlight, proof that the land has its own long memory. And a wicked sense of humor. Stick a pin in that notion, the soil might have another punchline tucked away. And that, friends, is how a busted barn, a rusted wrench, and a stack of honest paperwork turned a vanity lake into rye pasture, a marble mansion into a Grange hall, and an HOA tyrant into a footnote. The land got its say, the cattle got their grass, and I got a front row seat to the oldest Texas truth. Real value isn't measured by columns or chandeliers, it's measured by roots that keep drinking long after the champagne's gone flat. If there's a moral tucked between those fence posts, it's this: power built on pretense will always buckle under the weight of persistence. Community beats exclusivity when folks decide fear is too expensive, and the tools you know how to use, whether a wrench, a statute, or a neighbor's goodwill, are worth more than any tool someone waves in your face. We didn't just drain a lake, we flooded a neighborhood with perspective, proving that humility and due diligence can rewrite the story quicker than any demolition crew. So, if today's ride left you a little wiser, or at least grinning at the thought of paperwork outmuscling pearls, go on and tap that like hammer out your own hard-won lessons in the comments, and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next tale where ordinary grit sends polished egos skidding into the mud. Because out here, every story is a reminder that the ground remembers, gravity wins, and the quiet folks with dirty boots still have plenty to teach the world. Quick favor, neighbors, what battle should we tackle next? A petty HOA fee that sparks a neighborhood revolt? A crooked contractor who gets a taste of his own hammer? Or maybe a feel-good story where small-town grit outsmarts corporate greed? Drop your pick down in the comments or vote in the Community tab poll, because the next episode comes straight from your requests. The more you steer the channel, the more YouTube steers it to you and fellow story lovers. Can't wait to see what you choose.